Welcome to the Viewpoint. I am Mamadou Mboj. Today on the show, we have two distinguished guests who hardly need any introduction. Their credentials are in their names, so to speak, Mr. Halifa Sallah and Dr. Ismaila Ceesay. Mr. Halifa Sallah, well, we all know, the Secretary General of PDOIS, the political party, the People's Democratic Organization for Independence and Socialism. He's also a member of the National Assembly for Serekunda, and he's a prolific thinker and social commentator. In fact, in 2006, he was the presidential candidate for NAD, the National Alliance for Democracy and Development. And we remember one U.S. communique had this to say of him: a win by Halifa Sallah would almost certainly usher in a new era in Gambian government and politics. Salah's ideas are consistent with democratic principles, and we would expect a Sallah administration to be a reliable friend of the United States. And we have here Dr. Ismaila Ceesay. He's a senior lecturer of political science at the university. He is also the founder and current director of the MSc program in international relations and diplomacy. It is a mark of his achievement so far that he is listed as one of the 100 most influential young persons in West Africa. Welcome, gentlemen, to the Viewpoint.
Thank you.
Mr. Sallah, I'll begin with you. I will not ask you whether you would be a reliable friend of the U.S. But you've heard this concept, this new idea. Is it a new idea? Perhaps others have expressed the concept by using different words. You call it system change, because since the Gambia right now, we are in a transitional phase. Then perhaps I tend to think of it as is it your theory of change? What is system change?
Once we look at why we decided to become engaged, we'll answer the question. We imagine the Gambia precisely because of the extreme poverty, now 48% of the population living in abject poverty, 2019. We emerged at a time when at the level of even the government, people hardly knew what a constitution was. At the level of the village, they saw commissioners, National Assembly members, then members of the House of Representatives, ministers as real kings. There was complete innocence. And we were a republic. So fundamentally, system change means that we restore the sovereignty of the Gambian, so that we build a system where we finally realize that sovereignty resides in each Gambian. That translated into system change means that we are for a system of government where there will be national unity based on the understanding that we are equal in sovereignty, and irrespective of our ethno-linguistic origin, irrespective of our religion, gender, we are all equal in sovereignty. Fundamentally, that is also translated economically into ownership of the wealth of society, where there is the marine, terrestrial, atmospheric, all resources belong to the people. And this is where our fundamental difference lies. If you look at the economy now, a bank is what provides the basis to finance the productive base. The private sector, just about 9 billion is what they have in 2018 externally, and 22 billion internally. But the government raised 28 billion just in 1 year. And if you ask the private sector where they are putting their money, they will say, well, 28% is really the banks. It is going to 28% of those in that sector. So we are saying...
Yes, so we'll get back to that. Yeah, we will get to that. Just to get here Dr. Ceesay's reaction. Sovereignty back to the people, more or less, that's what you mean. What do you make of that?
Of course, thank you very much, Mr. Mboj. First of all, I would like to use this platform to extend my deepest condolences to the Gambian people and to the family of Sadauda Kairaba Jawara, who we've just learned of his demise. Sadauda was a towering figure in African politics, the founder of not only the Gambian state, but also of the other African. So I'll just use the opportunity to extend my condolences. Coming back to the question, yes, sovereignty of the people. I think no country can develop if it's not sovereign. Therefore, I've always advocated for what I call the Sovereign Development Agenda, an SDA. That is an agenda of development that is conceived of locally and that also is sensitive to our local realities and our context. Taking awareness of the fact that we have our own resources. How do we really harness our own resources to finance our own development? And I think sovereignty is key, and I think that is what Halifa has always been advocating, system change. That is a paradigm shift, a breakaway from what used to happen before in terms of our development agenda being conceived of and also implemented from outside and also financed from outside. That has been the bane of African development, of course.
Absolutely, but this hasn't this been our problem since post-independence? With our independence, post-colonial state, we thought, because the intellectuals more or less were in power, those who went to school, they were in power. But for some reason, it never worked really as a state. The political leaders were separate, as it were, from ordinary people. How is that? So how is one to effect system change? Because we need to get ordinary people to be signed on board really to understand it. So how do we get system change?
Very easily. This is what we told them. The colonial structure was alienated from the people because it did not intend to translate the economic realities of the country to serve the interests of the people. For example, go to any village now. You will find out, if you wake up in the morning, you are looking into ways and means of feeding your family. You must have a car-below economy. Without it, the family will not survive. But where is the village economy? We are saying that from the inception, there should have been a village council, and the taxes taken from the village should actually go into the coffers, into the consolidated fund of the village, but that it will be meager. We are saying you need a productive base to support the village. Here you are with land or streams, etc. We are talking about the cooperative economy. You need a cooperative bank that will have the resources from our sovereign national wealth, from fishing, from any mining that we may take place, from the public enterprises that we may establish, from all sources, so that you will be able to assist the village to be able to, yes, assist the individual villager with the farming implements, seeds and fertilizer the person needs to be able to produce at a larger scale, and therefore there will be individual development, but you will also have to have social development. Social development in the sense that the village farm will also get the support of the cooperative bank in order to produce and put it in the village fund for what? Milling machines, for providing water facilities. Every year you are providing something that will enhance the social development of the village. That is what is absent.
Yeah, is this something similar to Ujama, something similar to what Nyerere tried to do?
Ujama's weakness was precisely what we are saying. The creation of a cooperative bank, which will generate sovereign national wealth.
Like Singapore. Singapore did something like that.
Something like that. As I said, we are not, we've developed our understanding from the scientific base. You see, there are two ways of building an economy to eradicate poverty. If you have a solid financial base, industrial base, agricultural base, you may use consumption base of solving poverty. That is in Sweden and all. So what they do is tax the productive base in order to provide social services. But we cannot tax the productive base to provide social services. We are saying we must generate income. And to generate income, then we will provide resources to the productive base so that you'll be able to generate the type of income that is necessary for the social development of the villages. That's what we are saying. That is complete departure. That's what we call system change.
Yes, but here, this is it. It seems that we have the ideas. Writers have been writing about this for quite a while. We have the ideas, but one cannot understand how come there is no political will. With our politicians, we are used to now, in opposition, they will say all sorts of things. Just recently, our recent experience is quite an eye-opener for most of us. In opposition, they will say certain things, and then you vote them into power, then they become something else.
Yes, I think that's obviously, I've listened to Honorable Salah here and also his theory this model of building the productive base and also of having a sound economy based on obviously what is just said. I think unfortunately the country has never had the chance to give the DOI the chance to come and put this into practice. So anything we'll be saying here will be a bit hypothetical. We wouldn't know if perhaps had DOI been given the chance just before the coup in '92 or just after that coming to power, would have been the time to reflect back and see whether those ideals, that model of development was really something that was going to be successful or not in the Gambia.
So it seems you suspend judgment.
Yes, of course. I mean, it's going to be difficult to
But what
see.
about the idea of cooperative economics? We've been hearing about that for a while.
Yes.
And perhaps those who are more leaning towards capitalistic tendencies would tend to be quite sniffy, quite dismissive of such cooperative ideas.
Obviously, I mean, if you look at the African continent today, for me, in my view, I think a left-wing government would be the one that could usher in a transformative development for this country. Capitalism, we all know, is an exploitative endeavor. If you look at the colonial enterprise, it is capitalistic in its state. That is why the whole colonial economy was extractive in nature. It wasn't developmental. That is why if you look at the way they even build our transport systems in the African continent, they snake from the hinterland to the coast. That is why we have all the capitals in the coast, Mombasa, Lagos, Banjul. So that the whole idea was to extract commodities from the hinterland out to the to Europe and to America. It was not developmental because it did not connect African cities. That is why until today it is easier for you to travel from Banjul to London in 5 hours. It takes you 2 days to travel from Banjul to Bissau, Banjul to Bamako. You could post a letter from Banjul to London, it takes maximum 2 weeks. If I post a letter to Kiang or to Bissau, it will never arrive. So these are the legacies of colonialism. And until and unless we have a government that has the I don't want to use the right word, the guts, the bravery to come with a paradigm shift, something new, to break away. Obviously, it's difficult to come and break away from the host capitalistic mode of production because it has been here. I mean, but there's a way we can, this cooperative system can be, obviously.
Even socialist states
obviously,
have taken on
and the world has
elements
changed. Information technology has really brought a new dimension to this whole idea. So how do we really use these ideas and use IT and innovation as the dynamo to make sure that these ideas that sound so really nice when they are elaborated by my uncle, but bringing it into practice actually in reality is something else.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? Every idea and every new idea we have, really, I need institutions. It comes with its own institutions so that we can implement. I wonder, with your structure, with your idea, what sort of institutions would we need?
For us, there is a departure. I think we have studied the world economy. The distinctions people really make, capitalism, I think is very thin when you truly understand systems. I heard just a young man talking about Adam Smith and saying the father of capitalism. And I look at Adam Smith talking about the labor movement in UK at a time when they banned the operations of unions. And he was demanding that the combination, association of workers should be encouraged. Obviously, that's the principle that gave rise to the Labour Party. That's the same principle that gave rise to the whole Swedish social democratic system. And if you look at America, people don't study systems. America, the reason why it succeeded up to this level, you have what you call profit sharing. Most of the corporations eventually had to give shares to their workers. America has introduced, you look at the New Deal, and I don't want to go into all that.
Yes,
maybe you invite me later. So I'm saying that there is absolutely no leader in the world who wanted to eradicate poverty that did not see cooperative ventures to be a way. You go to England, whole housing schemes are cooperative schemes. I was just telling some people that, look at social security. Before you go and invest in Ocean Bay Hotel, look at Banjul, how filthy. With council, Social Security could have engaged in a contract. You take a whole street, value the compounds that are there, you know the value of the compound, you come and build high-rise building and give those people shares in high-rise building. Is that impossible? What makes that impossible? Why is that theoretical? We're not talking about theories. We're talking about practical things that are doable. You look at it.
We've never seen it before. I wonder whether one can point out one example in history where we've seen this sort of thing before that you're advocating.
It's not about it. It's everywhere. It's in Sweden.
Because
it is
the
Norway.
Inequalities.
Norway.
Because
Norway.
today inequality, that's all they're talking about.
What is Norway all about?
Inequalities are just
Norway
horrendous.
is a fishing nation. It was a very poor country. And they built up this cooperative system. And ultimately, they discovered oil. And that oil is sovereign national wealth. Regardless of conservative, whatever government, they do not dismantle that cooperative system. I'm saying cooperative is everywhere. I don't want to copy models. We are not copying. We are scientists. We know our reality.
But surely we can learn from others. I mean,
yes, we learn.
Yes, we've seen all this.
I'm simply saying the reason why I mean everybody respect us. We don't talk theories. We say concretely, and we analyze economies of the whole world. We know their strengths and weaknesses, and we indicate what we are convinced will actually solve. Look at our ocean. Go there right now, you'll find vessels all over fishing on our waters. What is the policy of the past government? What is the policy of the First Republic? What is the current policy? Is that you just look for people to come and pay fishing license, and go and fish in our waters. What stops us from getting fishing vessels, having a corporation that will actually do the fishing? What stops us from doing that?
That's a question very good to ponder. we will get back to that.
That's not theory.
What we see all over the world, really, the inequalities. Now everybody's talking about the inequalities capitalistically go to Britain. Some people are even blaming Brexit and what's Trump and Le Pen, what's happening in France and all the rest of it. They tend to blame that the huge economic inequalities has brought in this. So one wonders, how can we escape it? This has been our problem for such a long time, and yet we have these institutional weaknesses. You as a political scientist, you must be wondering, how do we strengthen political institutions? What is the relationship, I as a citizen, the relationship of the individual to the system or the institution? What is your take?
Yeah, I think you are right. Obviously, currently we've seen populist governments coming into power. The Viktor Orbán's of Hungary, this guy from Turkey, what's his name again? Erdogan of Turkey, Trump, and also Salvini of Italy. We've seen these anti-democratic tendencies popping up in Europe. When it comes to the Gambian case, I think really we missed the bus. We did not really, after independence obviously, things were okay for a while, but I think the 1994 coup really turned things around for us, because it takes, state building is not easy, especially if you look at the context of African state formation, which is different from European state formation. European states emerged from larger conglomerates of multinational empires that after the Peace of Westphalia, they built nation states that every nation should be housed by within a particular territory, having their own government that they call self-determination. Obviously, that was different. For us, it was smaller kingdoms and communities that were amalgamated into what they call states in Berlin, obviously, in 1885, in the so-called partition of Africa. And that also, with other legacies like the colonial legacy and also the post-colonial legacies, made it very, very difficult. The Cold War also made it very, very, very difficult for us. But I think for now, like Uncle Honorable Halifa has said, is to come up with a sovereign agenda for me. That is it. I mean, the Gambia, like he said, is not poor in terms of resources. We have a lot of resources. I'll tell you something. The amount of money we lose through corruption is much more than we get in aids and grants every year. If we are able to tighten that bolt to make sure that money doesn't slip away through corruption, if we are able to harness our seas, like he said, we have over 300 fishing vessels encroaching on territorial waters every day, fishing and taking, we are not getting nothing out of it. We have fertile soil. We have a youthful population. We have the River Gambia. Almost, I don't even think we even use 2% of its capacity. I think it has to do with new thinking for the Gambia, a new development model for the Gambia. Countries is talking about Sweden, Norway, they are very, very poor countries at some point. Sweden came up with what they call the Swedish model, that came up with a new development model for Sweden, and today you see what Sweden is about. Rwanda is more richer than Gambia. Up to 94, Rwanda was the country that birds wouldn't even fly over. But today we are looking at Rwanda as a model. Why? Because you see, at every point in time, look at China, Mao's great leap. Within 30 years, it was able to transform
What do you think some of the factors that really enable perhaps some societies to make certain leaps and others not to?
I mean,
because look at
it all
Africa
boils
here,
down to
more than
leadership,
50 years.
visionary, innovative leadership, strong leadership, who believes in building strong institutions and systems in place and processes. And people, get the people to make sure these systems and these processes work. That has been our bane especially in the Gambia. We've not been able to have visionary leadership. Today, the problems we are facing today, the environmental crisis we are facing today, education, health, infrastructure, these economic, they are not the problems that are created today. Our leaders failed 20 years ago to sit on the table and come up with a model, a 2020 agenda for the Gambia. What kind of Gambia do we want in 2020? How do we achieve it? That's what they fail to do. It's about planning, thinking, being futuristic, thinking like today we should be able, today our debate in this country should be what kind of Gambia do we want in 2045? Yes. Now we put the brains on the table to think how do we achieve it? What kind of agricultural sector do we want in the Gambia in 2045? Transport, infrastructure, and how do we, what resources do we have to achieve this? This is what is needed at this moment.
Exactly. Earlier on you mentioned about the nation, having a nation. Then I recalled Wole Soyinka's idea in the Open Source Continent that perhaps there is really no sense of nationhood. It appears as if we are fragmented along ethno-linguistic, you tend to call it ethno-linguistic lines or others, because it seems when you've seen it all over Africa really, whoever comes into power, then it's just for you and your clique and your clan or whatever it is, then you hijack the whole state and distort the whole thing. This sense of nationhood, I think, don't you find that that's lacking? There's a deficit in our sense of nationhood collectively.
Well, because the people cannot get ideas from the sky. You know, some people must educate. Look at our education system. Who taught us about sovereignty? Who taught us that by 1970 a new Gambia had come into being, where our executive, our members of the House of Representatives were our servants, not necessarily our lords. So nobody taught the people. So you can expect the people to be divided into religion, etc. So the people cannot be blamed for the problem. You must blame the leadership. The leadership never had the vision of building a nation. This is the problem of Africa, and we cannot continue to blame that leadership. What are we doing now to build a nation? This is the whole issue. So essentially, looking at it, we have to start the process that we have set to ensure the sovereignty of our people. Without that revolution, I call it the democratic revolution. There is a democratic revolution that has to be won. Without winning the democratic revolution, we are going nowhere. And that democratic revolution is the empowerment of the people to know that sovereignty resides in them. And irrespective of their ethno-linguistic origin, when they go to the hospital, it's national wealth that should provide the drugs, pay the doctors, provide the nurses. The same thing with the school system, the same with the engineers. So we begin to see a sense of national belonging by virtue of the fact that society is a division of labor, and none of us can live without the other contributing to our collective development. That agenda must come from the state. We cannot have illusion. We cannot talk about 2096. We must talk about today Gambia. Go to the village. What do you find? No milling machine, no labor-saving devices, poor drinking water, poor health facilities. That is the reality. How do we deal with that? We are saying you must build a productive base that will ensure individual income of a family as well as social income of a village, of a community. There is no other way, and we are saying that there is no other way but ensuring that you have the cooperative economy, starting with a cooperative bank, which will be a depository of sovereign national wealth that will go back into the banking system to ensure that you have the farmer at the village level will have seed, fertilizer, farming implements to be able to farm. Then you do not allow very few people to come and take all the land, produce. Let me just give you an example. In 2014, 1.9 billion was spent to import rice. 2015, 1.7 billion. 2016, 1.4 billion. 2017, 2 billion. 2018, 2.4 billion, I'm not talking about million, 2,400 million spent simply to import rice, when we have all the land to be able to produce that rice. When Jammeh said, we will not import rice again, how much did we import rice then? 2015, 2016, you see the quantity. We only end up producing about 69,000 tons before he left this country, when we need 200,000 tons. So in essence then, the way to development is there. We are refusing. And some of the intellectuals who refuse to think just theorize. They do not want to be concrete. But I am in the ACP EU Parliamentary Assembly. All the European countries in the EU are represented there. But when we speak, they listen, because they know that what we are saying is you cannot challenge it. So the basis of development is twofold. The democratic revolution to ensure that sovereignty resides in the people, and the economic revolution to ensure that people are empowered economically with a productive base.
Absolutely, Dr. Sisi, I bring you in here. We seem sort of reluctant to blame the people. We keep saying the leaders, the leaders. I once read one political commentator said that how we live collectively is really a reflection of how we are as individuals. I tend to tell people that unless I deal with our situation socially, we have a social innovation. Possibly we wouldn't have much control over who's going to occupy the State House. So there must be that connection, isn't it? If there's going to be a system change, individuals themselves must become a new electorate.
Of course, yes. I mean, obviously, it is the electorate that appoints or that elects the leaders to a democratic process. And the problem we've been having in the Gambia, in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, so to speak, is that people are not being informed, properly informed as to the leaders to choose, based on what the leaders can offer, and also based on the vision of those leaders. We've been electing leaders based on other parochial interests, like ethnicity, like other interests that are not very, very significant. But you have to understand that we went through a very difficult period as a continent. The trajectory of our statehood has not been smooth. It's not been a very smooth and straightforward path. We've undergone wars, we've undergone civil wars, obviously, we've undergone military rule, we've undergone one-party states, and so on and so forth. But now it's losing up, and also the Cold War had a serious effect on our trajectory of our statehood, and also our development. So obviously now is losing up. Now I think things are getting better. We've seen a very little of civil wars happening. Military coups are things of the past, and most countries are now becoming democratic since after the end of the Cold War. So I think now what needs to be done is to educate. The education system has to really play a key role here, because if people are not informed enough, educated enough to really make decisions at the polls, because whatever they decide at the polls determines not only their lives but also the lives of future generations. So obviously now our task is to do a lot of education, educate the people more so they know the value of their votes and also the importance of taking part in the electoral process. So
this is all part of the slow evolution, the political evolution of a society that had undergone so much trauma.
Of course, I mean, max, most of our countries are 60 years old max. You compare it to other developed countries, which is over 200 years old. You look at the UK, Germany, most of these countries are hundreds of years old. We are barely 60 years old. And also taking into consideration most of the disruptions along the way, obviously, it's a very difficult period. But I think I'm very hopeful of a brighter future for this
But that
continent.
might also mean that perhaps when it comes to certain ideas, because we have a long way to go, maybe this place wouldn't be fertile for such ideas to take hold.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, for example, I mean, I've listened to Honorable Salah here with his ideas of cooperatives. And I mean, you've asked him a very valid question as to where was this system tried before. And I think the one that comes closer to it is the Ujamaa of Nyerere in Tanzania. But there it failed woefully. And for me, there are no guarantees that it could really, because for me, there's a conundrum here, talking about focusing on villages. But now, as we speak, the realities are people are leaving the villages because there are no amenities there. Young people have left in droves. And currently, the way we are destroying our environment, rainfall patterns are also a bit erratic. We've seen it now. So for me, I think it's not as easy as we think.
But who is saying focusing on villages? That will be a very poor
No, I thought that was
conception.
one of the planks of your broader strategy.
It's eradicating the poverty of the people. People are living in villages. How do you eradicate their poverty? If you don't give them fertilizer, seed, farming implements, how will you improve rural agriculture? If you do not help them to have a productive base, how will they have farming implements? How will they also have fertilizer, labor-saving devices? You go and depend on charity as they do now since Jawara's days. Is charity help us to dig a well? Is that what we are going to continue to do? We are saying that you can help the village to have a village farm, just like the individual Kabilo has its farm, family farms, give them fertilizers, farming implements that will help to eradicate their poverty. This is what we are saying. What other scientific analysis can be made that can refute that? What we are saying that is what ought to be done. And let me emphasize, he said that, well, the Fourth Republic tried in what way? GPMB used to process groundnuts. In 1979, it had about 100 million deposited in foreign accounts. By 1992, zero. That it exported, it bought only 2,000 tons. Eventually, they had to sell GPMB. Gambia Commercial and Development Bank, by 1982, it had 190-something million in its accounts. How did it end up? Completely gone, that they had to set up the Asset Recovery Corporation to be able to recover about 300 million. Yes, cooperative was tried. But this is the difference. We are saying a cooperative bank. The cooperative movement was depending on the Gambia Commercial and Development Bank. If you go now and look at how much the cooperative owed the Gambia Commercial and Development Bank, never paid it. The cooperative collapsed because it could not pay its debts. We are saying this Agricultural Development Bank, they will not work. We are talking about a cooperative bank.
But how sure are we that will work? I mean, you are dismissing other ideas that they will not work, because yet you are emphasizing that yours will work. I mean, there are no guarantees that it will work. It's never been tested before.
Are we saying ours? We are saying examples are very clear.
But which examples in the African continent? I mean, do you have to understand that Europe are different from, I mean, you cannot compare Norway, what worked in Norway and what might work in a typical sub-Saharan African setting.
Okay, let me put it this way, let it be clear. We are saying at the macro level, you have a government with public enterprises. You know, I know, that Social Security spent 400 million to purchase Ocean Bay and refurbish it. That is not an area for a government to invest or a public enterprise. That's for the private sector.
So it's a problem of honesty and sound management.
No, wait. I'm saying that corporation could have gone to Banjul, to Serekunda, and negotiate and say that, hey, this place we are going to build it, high rise, and we'll make sure that, what the value of your compound will be reflected and you'll have your spot.
But that corporation could have also gone to some other place in rural Gambia and build housing projects, not necessarily in Banjul.
This is what we are emphasizing. I'm simply saying that at the level of the village is the same, that the family income increases as you give them fertilizer seeds and farming implements. They start to earn. It means that that family can work with that Social Security to improve the housing facilities of that family. That is how you eradicate rural poverty. We are talking about not only urban, rural. That dichotomy does not exist because of the law of proportional development. What it requires is that development must be proportionate. There must be equalization. So in essence, that is what we are talking about. We are not talking about Banjul development, rural development.
No, we agree with that. What we are trying to say also
and don't import also Ujama.
No, we're not importing.
Had no, I'm saying Ujama, where was the sovereign national wealth of Tanzania? What did they do to build sovereign national wealth? We must respect Nyerere. He was trying, but they lack the ideas. Why do you have Saudi Arabia, all these Arab countries, even though they are not democratic countries? What are they doing? It's sovereign national wealth from their oil that they have been utilizing. What we have, look at Nigeria and its wealth, and its oil, Angola and its. So, we should not give excuses. The problem of Africa is poverty of leadership. Poverty of leadership. That is our problem. And there's no excuse for that.
We agree with that, but I don't think also the system that they're espousing is a system that might also work. It's never been, that is our point contention. It's not been tested before. There is no guarantees that if
so
you...
what system do you have now? Can you tell us what system will work?
I'm not proposing...
What system do you have as an alternative to that system?
What I'm saying is that the system you are proposing, you've dismissed all other systems as they're not good. That is the system that will work and that should work. What we are saying is that there are, in as much as it sounds very brilliant and excellent when it is explained on paper, but there are no guarantees that it's never been tested that it will work. What I'm trying to say is that we can have other models of development that is obviously, I agree, we share this, that focuses on our sovereign wealth. And how do we use it to make sure we focus not on poverty eradication, we focus on wealth creation. And how we do that, for me, we have our resources. We have tourism, we have agriculture, we have our aquaculture, and then we have our youthful population. How do we go back to ensure that, first of all, we have a paradigm shift in our education system to make sure we produce Gambians who are skillful, whose talents are developed, and then look at our agriculture, for example, today. We need to innovate it. And the whole thing about innovation, it's not innovated because we've been selling the same products in 1965. How do we innovate it? In terms of building artificial game parks, in terms of looking at what can we do to make sure that we attract more tourists. How can we look at our agriculture? Obviously, I agree with him that we should provide fertilizer, mechanize it. That one I agree. But when it comes to our fisheries also, I agree. So in principle, I share with him most of the ideas. My contention is that there are no guarantees that if implemented, it will work. But in principle, I think me and him, we share the same ideas.
But Honorable Salah, I'll come in here. Obviously, what you're advocating here is a sort of medium to longer term project in many ways. So given how the country is like right now, we are heavily in debt, given how the country is right now, what would be your immediate change, for instance, in agriculture right now as things are?
Fundamentally, you cannot do anything with agriculture without providing seeds, fertilizer, farming implements to the farming community.
You have to buy that. You have resources. You need resources. Possibly you may need to get more loans.
What I'm trying to say, what you must bear in mind is that how much have we received as loans just this short period? 2.4 billion is what constitutes the National Development Plan. 2.4 billion. Where do you find in that paradigm the creation of a cooperative bank to be able to serve the rural economy? Where is it? That is the problem. That's what he has mentioned. People have a lot of ideas. Train the youths, give them this, give them skills, etc. But ultimately, you must go to the productive base. And the basis of economy is ownership of the means of production. And unless the youth own the means of production with all the skills, no development will take place, their poverty will never be eradicated. I was in Benin, and a lot of Benin youth, came to our ACPEU meeting. And you hear the theories again, youth skills training. Also, yes, we need all that. But then I asked them the fundamental question. What means of production do you own? Absolutely nothing. So how will they produce? Now let me give you an example. You are asking what can be done. A lady came to me and indicated I produced 40 bags of rice last season, 40 bags without any facilities to assess. 10 women, you are talking about 400 bags. Now in that same village, if you bring to the cooperative milling machine, they'll be milling those 400 bags. You also, through your cooperative, you help those people who are selling, the young people you're talking about, you help them to own shops and finance them. They'll be able to buy the bags and they'll be able to sell it. You have a whole chain from production, from milling, from selling. This is economy. And that will not drop from the sky. You must sit down and plan it. It is something that we are not talking about possible. That is the only thing that must happen. Any other theory about youth employment will never happen. All that will be just theory.
Obviously, that's his view, and I respect it. But I think the talk from the supposition that there be youths in the villages who are sitting there waiting to do that. And for me, I think that has changed. Many young people don't want to do farming anymore. So for me, how do we encourage them to go and do farming? Many young people want to do something else. I think we have to look at what is available and what they want to do. And because most young people want to play soccer, they want to be football stars. We live in a consumer society. You can buy these implements, you can buy these seeds, but who's going to be there?
Can I answer that question? I'm not talking about just the village economy. I'm just using it as an example. You have to have an urban economy. You have fishing. You have, look at aquaculture. All these are areas of investment, but not only that, areas of small-scale production in processing. How many milling machines can you distribute? If you have the producers of rice, how many other people will just be owning milling machine to process it? How many people will be distributing it, selling it? How many women are selling? That cooperative, they don't have the capital. The cooperative will give them the capital to be able to at least purchase and sell again. We are saying is the circular economy. You know, the economy must continue moving to build itself up. And you must build up the foundation. You cannot wait for industries. This is the near data. You're waiting for others to build industries, you know, to come and invest. You're waiting for, we're not talking about that. We're talking about cottage industries where people will be processing and people will be distributing. So it is just building up that synergy where the linkage is there. That's what we are talking about.
It sounds very nice, but it reminds me of the 18th century anyway. For me, I mean, with this new innovation, new science and technology, I'm waiting to see whether it will work. Even though it sounds very attractive when he explains it, and it gives me some feeling of nostalgia. But obviously,
nostalgia for what?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when it describes cottage, these things, it reminds me of, you know, when I read ancient books about how ancient societies developed. I mean, it takes me back there. But I mean, in this new consumption society, you know, where science and tech really is the leading thing. I mean, today, where young people don't want to stay and farm, where there is no land, in fact, anymore. They've sold the land to the capitalists as we speak. So for me, how these ideas will really work, really.
But maybe young people are fleeing the land because of the current situation. There's no incentive.
Because they want to live.
To stay there.
That is one. So that is why, for me, it's
that
is why that is problematic. Because today, what incentives are, you can buy the implements and the seeds and whatever, what incentives are there for them to go back? Right. So you see, that is why I say it's a conundrum. It's a conundrum. You have to build hospitals. You have to get something that's going to take them back. That is why that's the conundrum here. So that is why for me
the problem is that, you know, unless you understand economics, you cannot see what is being said. What is being said here is very clear. Is linking individual development with social development. We have said that at the village level, people are there. They have not left. They are there. They are producing. With those people who are there, we are not talking about those who have left. We are saying those people who are there, what do you do with them? The actual farmers. They own their family farms. They are farming it. We should not theorize people have left. We are saying people who are there, what do you do with them? And what we are saying, give them that facility to be able to produce, but the community will also be able to produce, to be able to earn income, so that they invest on roads, they will invest on water. And each year, can you imagine, since Gambia became independent, that there was a village fund where the village tax goes, and that cooperative helps the village, where there is a farm, where there is aquaculture, any other area, where there is processing, to be able to at least build the village social fund, to be able to have hospitals, to be able to have roads, to be able to have water, and with an increased income, as we said, linked with social security, to build a housing scheme. What type of villages will you have? Just like you have in all these other countries.
But it's relevant that the able-bodied, most of the young, they're all living. So if you want them to build that base from which they can start building roads and schools. And
well, you know, that is the starting point.
That will probably take them 50 years or more. I don't know.
Well, I think if you look at what is being said, it's not about 50 years, and it's about today. What do you do to upgrade what is there? You cannot talk about development without talking about what is there and how to upgrade it. That's what we are talking about. What you're going to achieve in 20 years, it depends on your starting point. You must start somewhere, and then you start your 5-year plan, 4-year plan. That's another matter. We are saying, as it stands, is it possible to eradicate poverty in our villages? The answer is yes. Is it possible to eradicate in the urban areas? We are saying yes, because some are buying and selling. Some will engage in all sorts of ventures, but they must have cooperatives assisting them in whatever ventures they are going to. That's what they are saying, that the cooperative economy is the heart of eradicating poverty in Gambia and the African continent. And he should go to India and see, you talk about cottage industries, what is called appropriate technology. That's what is called cottage industries. That's why people should do more research. If you go to India now, that's precisely what has made India, India. That's what has made China, China. China came through appropriate technology. All these things that we are learning now came through the Chinese experiment of barefoot doctors, appropriate technology. Small is beautiful. So many things. The reason why I am not mentioning them is we are not copying anybody. We've studied the science. We've seen how development had taken place. We've seen how ownership of the means of production had led to a situation where, as he said, many people are alienated because others have taken over their land. That is what happened in Europe. People were removed from the farms. They went into the urban areas. It is because of industrialization. That is what saved the European farmer who has been expunged from the farm. So they started to work in the industries. But eventually the industries could not get markets. And oversaturated markets led to collapse. In fact, that's what led to the labor movement, because they saw the suffering of the working people. Then they developed a system of social democracy, social welfare, where now you tax the big industries and ensure that you provide social welfare to the rest of society, so that schools, etc., could be provided. That's how it happened there. But we do not have the industries. We cannot tax anybody to be able to provide all the facilities. So for them, it's consumption-based. You must distribute. So eradicating poverty is a distribution system. Sure. But if you're even having difficulty now, because as they lose more markets, you will see that their social welfare system will start to be rolled back.
So they went through different stages,
and
different
really
social welfare came towards the end.
For us, it's a production-based to eradicate poverty. For them, it's distribution-based. It's different. This is economics.
Yeah, yes, like I said, in principle, what I think one of the problems I've been having with, obviously, though, is their scientific rigidity. And they've not been good at adapting to changing circumstances. And I think this is one of the problems that they'll face with these models if they don't implement it. Like, times have changed. And I think for me, I mean, like I said, in as much as they sound brilliant on paper, and by explaining it, I have a problem with seeing how it's really
What's the alternative? We must not be critics, especially the young of today. Cannot continue just to be critical.
I'm not critiquing it. I'm not
no,
critiquing
no, no, it's good. It's good.
What I'm saying,
no, I'm saying it's good. It's good to be a critic.
I'm not throwing it
but
out.
what is the solution?
No, what I'm saying is, I'm not. If I had said that it will not work, then I would be.
Okay.
I would be. It will my responsibility to profound alter. I'm not saying it will not work. What I'm saying is that we would want to see whether if we test it, whether it will work or not. Like I said, I agree with in principle, and I'm like the beautiful idea. Like I said, I'm a left wing. I mean, if you ask me, I grew up in Sweden. I grew up in a social democratic state, and I saw how Sweden developed. And I'm a fan of social democracy. I'm a fan of all these all these beautiful ideas. What I'm saying is that because it's not been tested, and I would love to see it being tested.
Absolutely. And with me, it reminds me of the philosopher who said that no science can plot the future of society.
No. I think that's that.
And I'll tell you one thing. I would love to. If we have a DOI government, obviously, I would love to work with Honorable to make sure that this thing. I would love to see this thing put into practice and work. I mean, obviously, no system is 100% sure that is going to work. Until and unless it is tested, then we'll start to see weaknesses and how we adapt and make sure that we, obviously, but
unforeseeable consequences.
Obviously, but what are my contention is, as much as there are no guarantees that if we put it into practice, obviously, considering circumstances, changing circumstances and certain things, that there are no guarantees that it might work.
Well, I believe it's very fair, you know, the statement now.
Absolutely.
For me, because
I wasn't condemning it though. I wasn't saying it
it's
will
all right.
work.
We understand.
Yeah.
So essentially, that's what we are looking at. How do we build up a productive base, but not also only the productive base, a political system that goes with the productive base. A political system where the people actually control power. They are in the academia. We must have a completely different.
But you don't see people as having power because we vote our presidents in.
No, that is where the power is.
That's where the power
and
is.
people should
Yeah,
know.
we vote, but do we know why we vote?
That was my argument here. That
You know,
the
a different
value of
process.
If you vote,
Yes.
you must know why you're voting.
That's a different process.
And
isn't
you
it,
will
of
hold the
understanding?
person to account. I'll give you an example. When we talked about the change, many people will say, well, these people changed the country, but they didn't even have a plan post-Jammeh. And on the 25th of December, everybody heard the president made a speech and indicated that there will be an agency for sustainable socio-economic development. And this agency will build an expert bank. And the expert bank ultimately will ensure that we create the short, medium, long-term plans. And it will enable us to hit the ground running. Everything was there. That we should create an expert bank, core people who will manage the agency. They'll create the expert bank around all those core issues. And people will build, we even had an agreement for a database to be built. So what we agreed then would be to ensure that before the ministers assume office, those different agencies, those sectors of the agency will prepare the short, medium, long term, knowing what you are inheriting from Jammeh. Know in 1 year what you are going to do, 2 years what you will, 3 years what you are going to do. All that was there, the blueprint was there.
Yes, so all agreed, but in the end, when they came into power,
That's what
when
I'm
the coalition
saying.
came into power, nothing happened.
Not only come to power, before even coming to
into
power,
power.
it was already collecting dust. That's what I'm trying to say.
So you brought us actually to our next theme, around 2016, the coalition.
Yes.
Now nobody's really talking about 2016 coalition anymore. It has unraveled. So I think we wouldn't be wrong when we say that it's a Barrow administration now. Everyone can say that.
Of course.
So now we're talking about, is it 3 years, is it 5 years? I mean, we've just been derailed in many ways. What do you make of this new Gambia? From Barrow, the coalition, now the MOU, 5 years. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think obviously when the coalition was conceived and midwife, everybody was very happy. Everybody was enthusiastic that now finally we'll have change. It was going to usher in a new Gambia, a transformative Gambia, a Gambia based on good governance, a Gambia based on systems and processes, a Gambia that will work for everybody. But then obviously the whole agenda was aborted since inception. We saw how it all started, and he was the same thing he was telling you. And that expectations were very high, they dwindled, they plummeted, and that was a very dangerous thing to happen. I mean, expectations can drop, but the manner in which they drop, if it happens so fast, it can have far-reaching consequences for a country. We've seen that now the coalition agenda is aborted. Now the focus is not how do we transform this country. The focus is on how we should govern. The focus is on who should govern. And that has narrowed the debate to 3 or 5, creating a binary between those who say the Barrow should go for 3 years or for 5 years. And that is really not very good for the country at the moment.
So where do you stand?
I mean, where I stand, to be honest, I'm going to tell you one thing. For me, I think the MOU was very clear, whether it was signed or not. It was a time when it was born out of necessity for us to stop self-perpetuating rule, for us to bring all the coalition, all the opposition members under one umbrella to agree on general principles. It was laid down that if you accept to be if you are elected to be the flag bearer, one, you should resign from your party. You should organize, you should oversee a term of 3 years, over which you will do all the reforms, especially the constitutional reform. We'll go for elections, and then in that election you cannot contest until after 5 years. 1 is to inject a new democratic culture in our polity. 2 is to avoid self-perpetuating rule. 3 is to start something that is something new in Gambia, that the whole we will be the envy of the whole world. Now, obviously promises were made. In my view, I think the president should, for the sake of our democracy, for the sake of his own integrity, resign after 3 years in line with his own promises. That is a moral issue. However, the people who are calling for the 3 years jotna, it is their democratic right to peacefully demonstrate to hold the president to account to his word or put pressure on him. But however, I don't think it's prudent at this time to force him out after 3 years. Considering the fact that if we want to force, there are no, for me, I haven't seen any contingencies post-Barrow. You force him out, so what? Are there any contingency plans? What is the way forward? If he's forced out, so what? Because if he resigns voluntarily, the constitution kicks in. The vice president finishes the rest of the term. There are checks and balances whereby we know, so there are safety nets that can ensure we have a peaceful and a stable post-Barrow administration for himself. However, if he's forced out, that's another thing. What are the contingency plans? If he's forced out, so what? We don't want to have a situation where we create a power vacuum in this country. And for me, like I said, I think he should resign because that is what he agreed on, and for his own integrity and also for the sake of our democracy. But if he fails to do that, I don't think he should be forced out through a popular riot or popular protest. However, the people, every Gambian citizen has a right to true peaceful demonstration or to petition, whatever you want to, any democratic means you want to use, to hold him accountable to his own word. So what I'm trying to avoid is a situation where we are going to create a power vacuum in this country, a situation whereby we're going to force a government out. I don't think that will set a very good precedent. Even though reneging on his promise will not set a very good precedent in terms of how politicians are perceived, not setting a very good precedent in terms of how we do politics in this country. But also, so we are in a kind of a dilemma, and I think this is a time when reason should precede emotions.
Yeah, so remember the whole MOU, it all looked so beautiful in paper. Look at it, what happened in reality in many ways. So, and I have to say this, just after the coalition was formed and the elections was going on, some of us took bets. We said, how long before everything comes apart? Some said 18 months, some said 2 years. Was it our cynicism of politics? But because historically, we always knew that coalitions and government will just come apart for some reason. Some of us were.
Well, I think I will still maintain my spirit until the day when I have the guts to tell the Gambian people the truth. I think they now have the luxury to toy with this notion. But when Mr. Jammeh was at the State House, and the leader of a major political party in prison, and we saw what was being orchestrated at that time, and knowing that anybody who tries to demonstrate in that street, obviously we knew what he said, you will be 6 foot deep in the grave. At that material time, 99.9% of Gambia never believed this country was going to change on the 2nd of December 2016.
Honorable Sal, I have to cut you there. We've come to the end. We all knew what happened and your stance.
So it is important for Gambians to understand what actually happened.
I think we're going to have to invite you again for.
Yes. I think that's important. Yes.
We've come to the end of the viewpoint.
Yes.
Thank you very much to my two distinguished guests.
Thank
It was
you.
a most
Fascinating,
fantastic conversation we had here today.
Thank
you very much, viewers, for joining us on the viewpoint. Until the next time, I'm Mamadou Mbodj. Goodbye.